Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, How to Get to the Omnichannel Future with Your Existing Technology. A few items before we start. We will be having a Q&A session after the presentation, so we ask that you enter the questions into the Q&A section at the top right of the screen. Just click on the button and enter your question anytime throughout the presentation. Hit submit, and we will collect them at the end. Okay, so on to the webinar. Today we will be discussing multi and omni-channel platforms and how to leverage your current infrastructure to create a more seamless experience for your customers. We hope that you walk away from this webinar today with a few things. First, a brief overview of the differences between multi-channel and omni-channel. Second, some of the benefits and challenges with each. And finally, some simple tricks you can easily implement to deliver an exceptional customer experience without spending millions on an entirely new omni-channel infrastructure. Again, just to reiterate, we will have a Q&A at the end of the presentation, so please enter your questions throughout, and I will direct them to Tom at the end. So let's get started. I would like to introduce you to our presenter, Tom Lewis, CEO of SmartAction. Tom has over 25 years experience focused primarily on customer experience and contact center operations and technology. Prior to joining SmartAction, he led the Deloitte Consulting Contact Center Advisory practice as a partner for 13 years. Over to you, Tom.
Thank you very much, Kim, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining. So let's get started. I think most webinars around customer experience should at least set the context for it. So let's get started with some understanding around how we measure customer effort, customer experience, and Net Promoter Score. So I've got this chart in front of you that has these three elements to it. In maybe 15, 20 years ago, people started out with customer satisfaction surveys, and they were very effective from the standpoint that it was a good way to dive into some details around how the experience with your organization was being perceived by customers. That evolved maybe 15 years ago into something known as NPS, or Net Promoter Score. The basis of this question, or this approach for understanding what your customers think of you, is to simply ask the question, would you recommend us to your friends and family or to others? Would you promote us? And so trying to understand what the Net Promoter Score was a good way to understand in one simple question whether you had a detractor from your business or not. That has evolved and lately is a new metric, which is called Customer Effort Score. You may have read about this in the Effortless Experience. It's a good book. I would recommend you read that. It talks about all sorts of things in customer support. But the Customer Effort Score asks sort of a different question, and essentially is asking if what you had to do today to get your task done was easy. And the notion is that regardless of the need for service, customers choose the channel that they choose based on whichever one that they perceive will require the least amount of effort to get the job done. And if they perceive that there is a low amount of effort to get the job done, then generally speaking, and the book's premise is essentially this, that bodes well for them being a high promoter as well as having overall good CSAT. So it's an evolution of this process. So to deliver customer experience and low effort, there are a multitude of delivery mechanisms. So let's get to the core of the presentation, starting off with a definition of multi versus omni-channel. And it may seem intuitive, but just to make sure that we're all on the same page, let me start here. When you think about multi-channel, and many of us have thought about it if we've gone to conferences in the last 5 to 10 years, where multi-channel was the big buzz, maybe 10 or 15 years before that, it was all around CTI, or computer telephony integration. And the buzz was basically allowing your customers to interact with you through all of these different channels, everything from mobile to text messaging, even fax, I suppose. But the idea was that your organization should be set up to be able to allow your customers to interface with you through multiple channels. The omni-channel world is exactly the same thing, except that it allows your customers to not only interact with you through multiple channels, but to begin one interaction in a particular channel and then migrate the conversation over to another channel while maintaining continuity and authentication and so forth. So let's take a quick poll here, and just curious from the audience, when you look at your environment, how would you describe the environment that you have in your customer service organization? So can you go ahead and quickly pick one of the choices there and click submit, and we'll give everybody just a second to fill that out. And for those of you auditing the class, can pick the last choice. Okay, well, while she's tallying those up, let's move on to the next one, and we'll share those as soon as we've got them. So let's go on to the next screen, which is really around the multi-channel environment. And let me highlight a couple of things that are in here from a capability perspective. I think most organizations grew up in using the multi-channel environment and did so by organically evolving and from one change to another. Often the channel has a different owner. So, for example, the website's often not owned by the call center. Perhaps the IVR is, but sometimes that's also owned by IT and so forth. And sometimes the information is available to one channel and not known to the other channel. So that's pretty typical characteristics of omnichannel from the standpoint of data not transitioning over. I think, some of us have seen that you can't see the status on the website and you have to call into the call center to get the information, or perhaps the knowledge base or whatever. But the biggest deficiency, frankly, is that the customer, is interacting with you through one channel and then starts on another one, but basically has to start over again. I often refer to this as the Dory from Finding Nemo effect, where every interaction is like, hello, do I know you? The good news is that each channel was often deployed using the best-of-breed solution for that channel. This goes to an important point that I find from my consulting days in the call center, and that is that when I went into call centers in companies all across the country and the globe, for that matter, I often describe them each as a snowflake. Each one has a different operational footprint, a technical footprint, and whatnot. And even today, using any number of the technologies that are out there, that there is such a fragmentation between what your telephony backbone looks like versus your quality management, workforce management perhaps, IVR, et cetera. And so often what organizations do is as they evolve and get budget to do these various things, they will deploy a best-of-breed solution. And in doing so, it's important that they be able to integrate with whatever else you have out there. And frankly, given that I think most technology vendors understand that you're often placed in that situation, they try to maximize their integration from one vendor to the next. So now let's compare that or contrast that to the omni-channel environment. The theory on omni-channel is good, but there's some sort of realistic, elusive elements to it. And that is that even if you could create an environment where, like from the agent's perspective, they take a call, and then maybe the next thing in the queue that's the most important is a chat, and the next thing is an email. The technology can support that kind of multi-channel, multi-queuing type of environment, but frankly, creating operational parameters, operational environment around that is not particularly realistic. Some have achieved it, but I think that requires sort of, give you the standard consultant's answer is it depends from the standpoint that doing operational metrics on the performance of agents becomes very difficult if they're flipping in and out of one channel versus another, and so forth and so on. So it makes managing that type of thing very difficult. The other thing is that if the platform that's being implemented, that is an omni-channel sort of forklift replacement that provides all of this different capability, very often that monolithic environment is something that is more of a jack of all trades and not necessarily a master of any of them. And that is in contrast to what we talked a minute ago about the best of breed scenario. So if there was a best of breed across all of those things that was still, one vendor, one monolithic type of thing, then great. But very often that's not the case, and it also means that there's often and I use the word forklift, but sort of a major reworking of the entire telephony infrastructure. And so the goals of omnichannel are good from the standpoint of allowing customers to easily migrate from one channel to another, which is without starting over, which is good, and really allows customers to understand, or rather organizations to understand their customers and their behaviors and how they're using those various channels, and allow your customers to have a positive impression of you relative to the fact that you're using the latest technology and you're making it, back to that very first slide, easy for them to do business with you. And frankly, if you sum all that up, it should equate to a more operationally effective model for you. So let's talk about the premise of the webinar, which was the 4 ways to act omni-channel without necessarily the cost and channels of it. I'm not saying you shouldn't go that route. You shouldn't do something major from an omni-channel implementation perspective. But what I'm saying is, until you get there, or if you don't want to get there, there are some things that you can do in the interim to get some of those benefits we just talked about on the last slide. So let's talk about what I refer to as the original sin. This is something I think all of us can relate to as customers. You call into a call center and you authenticate with the IVR. You've entered in your account number and PIN. Perhaps you tried something in self-service. Perhaps it was just a routing exercise, and you get to a call center agent, and the agent says, "Hi, how may I help you? Okay, can you give me your account number and PIN?" And you're like, "I just gave the system that. Why didn't that happen? Why didn't you get that?" So I refer to this, like I said a moment ago, as original sin from the standpoint that when you think about going from one channel, the IVR, to the agent, and that information not transferring, that's an example of not omnichannel. On the other hand, to execute against this is very easy. I mentioned a few minutes ago that in the 90s, the evolution or the introduction of CTI was something that everybody was talking about. And I think actually at that time, most people would say by the late 90s, everybody will have CTI implemented, and you'd be a fool not to do that. What's surprising is the number of organizations I've been in who still don't have the CTI capabilities, or more specifically, the ability to pass data from the IVR to the agent desktop, so that what is affectionately referred to as a screen pop, or that the desktop application will pop in front of the CSR, the customer service representative, with the account number and PIN or whatever other information is appropriate. CTI capabilities typically come with the switch manufacturer or OEM capabilities, and so very often if you put together the ROI or business case model for this, I don't think I've ever seen one that doesn't pay off. So if you've got that type of environment, then that's the first opportunity. So what might be interesting here, back to what I said a minute ago, whether people have CTI or not, is let's take a quick poll and determine if this audience have CTI enabled in their organizations. On this one, it's pretty simple. Either you do or you don't. The third choice, of course, again, is I'm just auditing this class. So I'll give you a chance to do that. Okay. The second one is related to chat. And the diagram over on the right, I probably should have highlighted this on the last one, so there's sort of a way to read this, is that the red objects are the elements of the multi-channel or omni-channel environment that we're talking about, and the red lines are connecting those things. And so in this case, it's a chat to web or IVR, and that is that often, even though you may or may not have to authenticate to use chat with your customers, very often, even if you've authenticated, it's not a particularly secure environment to take, let's say, a credit card payment or something like that. But that doesn't mean that your business process doesn't have something that requires credit cards to be captured. And so one way to integrate these channels, instead of having the chat agent now pick up the phone and call the customer, which frankly is how most people get around, most companies get around this particular thing, is they get to the point where they're ready to capture the credit card and they say, well, I'll call you. And it's like, well, no, it sort of defeats the whole purpose of doing the chat in the first place. So one way to do it is to send them a hyperlink that redirects them to the website. It's very easy to do that, given if they have already authenticated to get into chat in the first place, then that should be fairly straightforward. On the other hand, if not, then you can redirect them through the authentication page. The other thing is that you could use a hyperlink or a serial number in the chat to redirect caller to an IVR or to ring the phone into the IVR directly. So, for example, if customer needs to make a credit card payment, you can actually just submit that to a web service that will actually call and take the credit card number right there through the IVR. Now, that's not much different than taking it from the agent's perspective. However, the difference here is that it remains secure from a PCI perspective and may allow you to, let your chat agent continue on. And there's probably a couple of others in here too that can sort of satisfy that requirement. One option is to send them a hyperlink to a mobile pay application. We have some clients that use mobile pay where they simply just do it through texting, and they've already signed up and they're just confirming that the payment should be made. So that's number 2 on the list, is the integration between chat and various other channels. So let's talk about number 3, which is the web. So on this one, again, the picture on the side is sort of an integration between the web and, in this case, the IVR, and that's the customer is browsing the web but wants to continue via phone. I would say this is probably the most common of the multi-channel, omni-channel kind of scenarios. And so there's a couple of ways to do this. The poor man's way is to use a unique phone number on each of the key pages. Now, by key, I mean, the important ones. I don't know that you'd put a different phone number on every page of your website, but if you're got particular website pages that are driving traffic to your phone channel, what you can do if you are exposing the contact phone number is to put different phone numbers on each page. And by doing so, when the call comes in, you'll know right away that the reason they're calling from that phone number or to that phone number rather is because they're on, let's say, the order status page, or perhaps it's a product inquiry page or an account setup page or what have you. You can treat the call and route the call appropriately, which creates a much better seamless experience as opposed to the why are you calling? And so it's a little bit of a predictor there. If you want to up the game a little bit more on top of that, you can actually put a serial number on that page and expose that to a web service that will not only allow you to know what page they were on, but you can use that as a simple way to authenticate them to pick up the conversation from where you left off. Requires a little integration on the website side, but not a significant amount. And it's a clever way to make a seamless from one environment to the next type of transaction. So let's go to the 4th one, the last one in this list, which is the SMS and email. This one's got the IVR, SMS, and email, and it's a situation where you need to share detailed information or pictures or other content with a caller that's involved or integrating or interacting with the IVR. So while you're talking to the person on the phone through the IVR, sometimes you could need to send them a picture of something, and one easy way to do that is to text them the URL of where they can get that picture, or you can actually then send the caller an email through the IVR which has the same information and perhaps even allow the caller to decide which one of those channels they'd prefer. So through those 4 choices, I think, or 4 examples, I think you're getting a sense for the idea that there's lots of ways to stitch each one of these different channels together. So something to consider. I'm sure there's probably about 20 others, but this is a good start. Now here's something we'd really like. This is my ode to Rocky and Bullwinkle. And what I thought I would do in the last few minutes here is just talk about a couple things that come to mind when it comes to smart action. I've tried to, for the first 25 minutes or so here, stay away from the smart action topic, but let me explain how what I just said also correlates to smart actions in the world. So first of all, we are omni-channel today, and in fact, when you take into consideration the best of breed comments that I made earlier, clearly everything we talked about in the presentation today is stuff that we either do with our customers or can do for them. We obviously don't do everything for all of them. We can deploy these things amazingly quickly. we're happy to talk more about that, but not to get into too much of a sales pitch. The thing I really want to focus on is that our entire focus is really around solving business problems and not trying to necessarily just focus on IVR or technology. And so what you'll see from us in our delivery is that it's really around the business aspects of it. So one of the ways that we go to market is that we have something referred to as an industry print. In each industry, we have the ability to enable lots and lots of different business processes. I was talking recently to an electronics manufacturer, and they were having some problems with their warranty business, and it was taking a considerable amount of time for customers to get the answer to whether the warranty replacement would occur, and that's because they had an elaborate back office process that was involved. When we dug a little bit deeper, what we realized was 80 or 90% of those back office checks were passing without any hang-ups. Only 10 or 20% required further interaction with the customer. So our suggestion is to interact with the customer up front and give them the impression or the expectation that there's a high degree of likelihood this is going to go forward without any follow-up, and only that 10 or 20% of follow-up would actually need to happen. So it's a business process integrated into this interaction with the customer through the IVR self-service. We have this type of mindset and these kind of capabilities for quite a number of industries. When we think about our business model, though, it might seem like the classic IVR discussion, where you have self-service is able to handle simple things, and live agents are handling your middle tier and your more complex transactions. And we've morphed that model a little bit, and that part of it was the business story I was telling you, but part of it also was this idea that our roots in artificial intelligence, our business model, and our capabilities in voice self-service means that we can handle a lot more capabilities into that middle tier, which will significantly reduce costs and delight your customers, back to that customer effort score that we talked about at the beginning. So what we talked about today, hopefully that 2 or 3 minutes wasn't bad in the sales pitch. The rest of it hopefully was high content, where we talked about the overview of the difference between omni and multi-channel. We also talked about the benefits and challenges of each platform strategy. And finally, we talked about some initial tricks anyway around how to leverage what you've got and to make it into an omni-channel environment and delight your customers. So with that, I want to thank you very much. I think, Kim, I'm going to turn it over to you to help facilitate the Q&A if there's any, and we can go from there.
Okay. So thank you all for staying on board with us. But we do have Q&A right now. So we have a couple questions already, but if you have any, enter them in here, and I will collect them. I think you can see my cursor now on the Q&A button right at the top. So feel free to send some in, but Tom, I'll get started with the first two that we have. Someone mentioned that they already have a perfectly functioning IVR, but they want to add some of these additional features. So how would they go about that?
Well, I think that the technology that people are using can vary, as I mentioned, as sort of a snowflake. In Smart Action's world, our view is that we're trying to automate things that live agents would be doing. So if you already have a IVR in place, easy to augment those capabilities with Smart Action and don't necessarily have to replace what you have. Typically, the scope that you used for your IVR and your design and your development was based on the fact that that's as far as that technology would go. Given Smart Action's ability to go significantly deeper into the capabilities and self-service many more complex business processes, we can just hang off of those existing IVRs. I will tell you and warn you, though, that what typically happens is we start there, and then typically the client comes to us and says, all right, we've got a whole nother, that was good, that was great, let's do a whole bunch more of those kind of things. So, but easy to start lower down in the IVR, if that makes sense, but also fine to coexist with any number of IVR environments.
Okay, and another question we have is, I don't understand the difference between the visual IVR and some of the text IVR examples you were giving. So maybe you can elaborate a little bit on the difference.
Sure, I'll be happy to. So I didn't talk about visual IVR in this presentation, but it is another capability that is out there for call centers to employ. And the idea is that, I mean, in one way to think about it is it enables a user, say on a smartphone or potentially in a website, to navigate the IVR down to a certain point so that then they can essentially insert themselves lower in the IVR and not have had to gone through the effort at the higher ends of the IVR. It's sort of a Band-Aid solution to a problem, which is that IVRs typically are not high on the customer effort score, and this is a way to try to put lipstick on that pig to make it a little bit prettier. So the difference, I don't know if I'm answering the question entirely, but the difference is basically that visual IVR is an additional capability. In fact, I would consider it a sort of a wrapper or a layover on top of your organization, and something that's separate, could be separate from traditional IVR. Okay?
Okay. One more question. Where do you, in regards to IVR, see the technology going? There's still a lot of kind of controversy around it and it not being a wonderful solution. People struggle with the robot voice, and people also struggle with the artificial intelligence aspect of it. So the question that was asked is where do you see the future of this and an improvement in the technology?
Well, I often ask the question, what do you think the call center of 2050 will look like? And invariably, the response will be that I think there'll be a lot of automation, and in fact, I think there'll be fewer call center agents because a lot more technology will have taken hold. Everything from more capabilities in websites, more capabilities in mobile, more capabilities in IVRs and voice self-service. So I think that there's clearly going to be a migration towards that. But I could also go the other end of the extreme and talk about things like Elon Musk and others who have warned of the advances of artificial intelligence. I think when we think about artificial intelligence, what we're focused on is really around customer service and enabling the things that call center agents do intuitively inside an IVR. And that capability allows for an expansion of self-service, which means that the call center agents that are remaining, certainly for the next 20 years or who knows how long, will end up answering more complicated calls and more value-added calls, and the IVR is handling some of the simpler stuff, but not as simple as it used to be, just more routine and rules-based types of stuff. So truly the agents then are handling the exceptions more than the rule, I would say. One of the other limitations, however, is the ability to do really, really good speech recognition. And from a speech recognition perspective, there's a limited number of vendors out there. We have spent a ton of time and energy on enhancing our speech recognition engine to improve it. And the improvements in that area are happening all the time. One of the things I'll say is that as technology advances, in fact, some of you may have seen my speech that involved a significant part of Moore's Law and the idea that technology and its capabilities are doubling still. When we think of our technology, I think that there are other technologies that have humans involved and other things that aren't really using the AI and they're more the traditional IVRs, that those technologies are fast going to get outpaced by technologies like Smart Action that have a lot more the AI component, advanced speech recognition, and so forth in it. Sorry for the long-winded answer, but there was several pieces or parts to that one.
So that actually wraps it up. That was our last question, so it's okay that you went a little over on that one. So everyone, thank you again for joining. I hope you were able to learn a couple things about omni and multi-channel technology and figure out a way to implement some of those tips we gave you in your own environment. Second, if you still have questions or want to hear more about Smart Action and our artificial intelligence-based voice self-service solution and how we can help your organization, please reach out to one of our sales executives who you can find easily at our website, smartaction.com.
This is IVA, the next generation of artificial intelligent voice self-service automation. Here are just a few examples demonstrating how I can take self-service to the next level.
What general information would you like about the Honda Center?
When do doors open?
This is event-specific information. What is the name of the event you would like to attend?
What time would you prefer your new appointment to be?
Could I have Friday early a.m.?
How about 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. on Friday?
What operating system is on your device?
Windows
Which version of Windows are you using?
XP.
Can we ship you the same mask you previously ordered?
Yes, please.
Thank you. An order confirmation will be sent to the email on file.
How about 1 p.m., Thursday, March 20th?
Do you have anything earlier?
Would you prefer 11 a.m.?
Perfect.
What service do you require today?
I need the truck towed to Capital GM.
No problem. I'd be happy to schedule this tow for you.
What is the 16-digit credit card number?
Wait a minute.
Okay, let me know when you're ready to continue.
I'm ready now.